Now, you probably know that there have been some new statistics and a bar chart that have come out that we've seen and we've been talking about and sharing with people about what the actual crime statistics, according to the FBI, based on our reported numbers from both of your organizations. And what it shows is the opposite of what I thought it was, the opposite of what we've all been told is that crime is going down in our area. Now that you've probably seen that, and we just sent you a copy of that as well to your email address, Police Chief Landis, Bill. That being the case, you probably have seen these numbers. There needs to be some kind of explanation for it because if these numbers are accepted, that's it for the levy. That's it. That's it for the next levy.
So Dale, I guess without me looking at charts and whatever and stuff, when you look at data, what data are you looking at provided by who? And I guess the question I would have for you is, if you're looking at a decrease in crime statistics, we separate crime as the UCRs do into Part 1 and Part 2 offenses. So you have the serious violent person-to-person crimes in Part 1 offenses, and then we have Part 2, which usually is most of your property crimes and other things. So ICMA, which just did an audit in 2014 looking at statistics here in the city of Grants Pass, if you look at it, national trend shows violent crime is going down nationally. However, if we stacked up our violent crime, we're very safe within the city. The problem is property crime is through the roof. So your drug offenses and your property crimes, we actually look embarrassingly bad at those statistics in comparison. And the last thing I guess I would share with you about statistics is when people quit calling 911 or quit calling the police because they don't feel like they're going to get somebody, the problem with your crime reporting is it actually starts to show like crime is getting better when in fact it's not reflective of actually the true number of crime.
But listen, other than stories or presumptions about that having taken place, what do you have to back up that there's been an increase? Because that sounds like what you're saying.
Well, so a couple things about statistics and stuff is there's in criminal justice research, there's something called the dark number of crime, or basically crimes that are not reported to law enforcement agencies. And there can be a full variety of reasons why that doesn't happen, where they feel like they won't get a response, whether there's no one available or what have you, and certainly our county has that. So I guess the other thing I would say...
So wait a minute, hang on, you're saying we have statistics on that?
Research, I teach criminal justice. Okay. So there's the dark number of crime is crime that is not reported, so that things like the uniform crime reports can't actually capture that. So if you look at reported crime, we can certainly draw conclusions from reported crime. I guess my challenge to you and my question is, how do you draw conclusions for those crimes not reported and what is reflective of that? And hang on, let me finish. Okay. One of the measurements of that is the perception of safety. So out in your rural areas where people feel safe or not feel safe is truly sometimes more representative of the issue than the actual numbers of uniform crime reports and data that you're trying to say is reflective of whether there's a problem or not a problem.
Yes, but the problem with what you're saying is that it's not quantified. You know, this is we're stating this as a theory, but there isn't any numbers to back that up. It's just an assumption, or
Actually, it's not an assumption, but I would say this to you. If you went out into the rural areas and different areas of Josephine County, one of the things you'd want to do, and there are national crime surveys that are used in different areas to actually capture that dark number of unreported crime. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we don't do that here, but nationally they do it in different pockets around the country. And that's how this phenomenon got known, is that actually when you look at those surveys, and those are people who report that they've been victims or whatever, versus what was actually reported, that's when you start to capture the fact that there's actually more crime than what the uniform crime reports will capture. So the other measurement then, and this comes from those experts that look at criminal justice and do criminal justice research, is when you go into a community, does that community overall have a sense of feeling safe? Because that is really then the other measurement of whether or not you're sufficiently serving the community from a criminal justice perspective or not.
I got to jump into this one at this point.
Yes.
I do understand what you're saying, but one of the reasons why, I'm not saying there's no crime. Look, neither Mike nor I, well, I'm not an idiot, okay? So we have to toss a little levity into this tough subject,
Okay.
Mike, please. Okay, so the problem with that is that one of the reasons why we feel unsafe is that a previous law enforcement official, and I won't mention him by name, but his initials are Gil Gilbertson, was telling us that 9% of the homes in Josephine County had been broken into. He had a press conference. He had a press release where it was saying 9%, and then it turned out later he had to admit that that was totally not true. So one of the reasons we have this perception is that when you go to KJO's News, it's all crime from New Jersey, any crime they can find. It's all that's on their website as far as the news goes. What proportion of this is based on reality and what's based on perception that's being pushed by people who want to raise our property taxes?
Well, Dale, the only thing I'd say about your perception issue is, if I live in a certain area and stuff and my car has been broken into, I'm going to have a different perception than you who may not have had your car broken into. So the only thing I would say to you is that that's why those citizen surveys are important, because that's actually how you start to measure, what the public wants, what they feel as far as safety, and that's kind of how you start to try to solve your criminal justice challenges.
Well, and that is a good point, but we're not doing that here. And what you had said was that there's a perception of being unsafe. And I think even in the campaign events that you guys have had recently, you talk about where it's worse than it's ever been and crime's out of control. Well, I'd just, number one, like to have something that's backing that up, and then that certainly could add to the perception of some people that it's very unsafe here. I personally, people often make this assumption, well, the economy's doing real bad, I'm doing fine, but my neighbor, I think, is probably not doing as well. So they have this perception of the economy being bad. Well, it may well be the same way with crime, and I understand that you guys really want to get funded. But I'm wondering, is there some way to shore this, what did you call it, black?
Yeah, the dark number of crime.
Number of crimes.
That's where those citizen surveys come in. And, my understanding is, I wasn't involved, but my understanding is the group that's got the petition to move forward with the levy in May, that's really what they were doing, was data and research and surveys to make that determination.
I see.
But let me just say this, Mike, to you. I would ask you this question. I've lived here since the 70s, and I guess I'd ask you this. I've never felt more uncomfortable leaving my car or truck at a boat ramp, in Josephine County to go rafting or do something along the river than I have now. Mm-hmm. And while I'm in law enforcement and I can certainly look at numbers and data, which I do throughout my year and my career, I would say one of the things that I know personally is that I have a different perception than I've ever had about leaving that truck or that car there and what potentially is going to happen, more so than any other time I've ever lived here. And that's in those rural areas. So I would say just personally that I have that feeling, and so I open it up to those folks that live here and have lived here a while too, and how they feel about that.
But is your feeling on that based on numbers?
Well, I guess I would have to defer, but we were talking about the dark number. So my issue is, how do I know that a lot of those people along the river are still reporting those crimes when they know a deputy's not even going to come out and take the report?
Right, and how do we know they're not?
So all I was talking to you about is that feeling and that perception issue, and I was asking you the same thing. I don't know if you frequent the river or do recreational things. How long have you lived here, Mike?
About 12 years.
Okay, and where did you move from?
From California.
Okay, so I might have moved from a high crime area in an urban setting in California to Josephine County and have a whole different perception of crime because of where I came from versus someone that might have lived here for 30 or 40 years and who have watched things kind of change over time and has a different perception. Would you say that's probably fair?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, listen, individual perception is an individual thing.
So combined, though, if we took most of them, that's why I say surveys are important. If we took a combined survey and we started to listen and ask people about that, then that should paint the picture of what we're talking about here.
Now, wait a minute. Now, this survey was paid for by Cuffs And the people that they asked to do the survey not only just did a scientific survey, but are also selling them services of how to pass the levy. So this thing about perception, I do understand you, and I was surprised by the FBI crime statistics, which are based on what we report to them. But here's my point. The county commissioners have said, boy, you know, if you just have a positive attitude and feel like the economy is doing better, then it will. And the reverse is true. If you want to get someone to vote for a levy, if you tell them things are going to hell in a handbasket, then that serves those people who are saying that. It's all perceptions, and if we're going to vote on perceptions, my perception is I can't afford hardly anything, and I don't trust the county commissioners. So that vote's over. If we're just going to base it on nothing
Dale,
but
my
perception.
job, and I think the sheriff would probably say the same. We're not here to talk to you about a levy. What we're here to try to talk to you about is our job and crime and what we basically try to attempt to do based on what we see and what we know to do. So I'm not specifically engaging you based on a levy or funding. I can tell you what the needs are based on our job and what we've done. You know, I've worked here for, almost 25 years. Dave's worked here a long time, and I think both of us are trying to come at this to not whether or not we need more money, but I can tell you that you can't do with what we're basically talking about here.